Beautiful day. Beautiful day. I didn't come in until later this morning. Got the chance to walk. I get a walk in an hour every day, right, before after school. And it was a two-bunny day from my park, so that's a good day. That's a good day. Yeah. So I want to welcome you today. This is GPSA, part of the teaching certificate. I'm Dr. Watson. I'm an Associate Dean for Academic and Professional Programs in the College of Education. I'm also a professor of higher education. I've been on campus since 2005, so I'm seasoned. I'm well seasoned. If you were to nibble, I am good. I'm really good. A couple of things that we're going to do today, or primarily our focus is going to be to talk about handling difficult situations in the classroom. And the way I like to do that is through the pedagogical use of buzz groups. Does anybody, I know Shelley, we've worked together many, many times. Does anybody else know what buzz groups are? Or are you familiar with that pedagogy? So buzz groups are, you're going to be working in small groups. So it's to facilitate small group discussion and or problem solving, and then we'll come back and do a large group debrief. Okay, so we'll be interacting in that manner today. We'll navigate difficult situations first by unpacking what I like to consider unpacking IHEs, so institutions of higher education, right? That's an acronym that's now becoming more visible in the literature as we have more discussions about higher ed, the impact of administration, not administration, words, politics, right? So I want to unpack a little bit what it means to be in an institution of higher education in 2017, because I do think that's particularly salient to how what we do before, during, and after to try and forestall a difficult situation from occurring, right? Because that's what we want to do. We don't want to have any difficult situations, right? So I want to talk about that, and then I have some scenarios that we will unpack how you all would handle it, tying it to. So this discussion is based on my years. I have almost 30 years of teaching experience. The middle school, 7-8 years at the middle school level, health and PE. Which I love, and not that different than being in administration, I will say, and then 22 years plus in higher education. And so my experience is working with different populations as well as what's in the literature, so we're grounded, right, practice and theory. And then anything else we can squeeze in. Today I had been given a different time, so I need to be exiting about 2 o'clock, so we won't go until 2:30 today, okay? Is that good? Is that good? Okay. What I'd like to do is if we could just take just a quick minute, and if you would please tell me, and your colleagues here in the room, there's only 5 of us, so we get to be quite intimate. Your name, your program of study, and yeah, your name and program of study. I think that should be good. Maybe we start.
Yep. My name's Claire. Hello. I just started my first semester here as a graduate student, and I'm in the ARL program. It's an alternative route to licensing for elementary education. And so I'm just trying to gather all the information I can about teaching.
Tell me your name.
Claire.
Claire, what's your last name?
Bolen, B-O-L-E-N.
Okay. Nice to meet you,
Nice
Claire.
to meet you.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm also in the ARL program. It's my first year as well, and I'm also trying to be a sponge and absorb as much as I can.
Right on. I like that. Sponge-like.
My name is Shelley. I'm in the Department of Anthropology, and I'm this close to ABD. But I just love everything about teaching, so that's why she's seen me many times.
Nice.
I'm Courtney. I'm in the Comm Studies department, second year master's. Just trying to survive at this point, so.
I'm Dorothy. I'm finishing my second year of my PhD in English.
Okay, great.
Congrats.
And our camera woman.
Hi, my name is Sharice Mason, and I am a theater and dance major.
Thank you. All right. Well, again, welcome. So let's go ahead and form our buzz groups. So to do that, we have an unequal distribution of folks. You two know each other.
Yeah, so it's separate, right?
Well, actually, I think for this conversation, it might be better to have homogeneous groupings because you're both ARL, and so that's your context. I don't think either way is wrong. So but actually, for the interest of this next step, let's do that. So I'm going to go with your thought, Claire. If we can do 3 and 2, that would be fabulous. Okay. So get in close proximity with each other because that will be who you have the opportunity to discuss and work with.
Here I am.
You settled that. I just sat here.
So one of the things I think is, as I mentioned a minute ago, A, it's really hot in here. It's really long. B is the saliency of recognizing who we have in our institutions of higher education 2017, right? We've seen a shift of the magnitude not seen before in institutions of higher education since the culmination of World War II, when we had the veterans return after war, and we also had the shifting demographics, right, as it pertained to civil rights era, access of women, minorities, to institutions of higher education on top of or in parallel with our veterans returning in very, very high numbers. And what happened in higher ed, when you look at read the history of higher ed, which is really riveting actually, because it does parallel what's happening socially, right? Institutions of higher education had to do things very differently, very quickly in order to promote success, create access, right? But then just handle all the diversity that was coming through the doors, right? I think, and it's corroborated in the literature, the last onwards of 3 decades, we've seen a 300% increase in the number of students that have access to and therefore attend institutions of higher education, right? So that's a huge number of folks that come to college that 20, 30 years ago, yeah, Josh wouldn't even have thought. And with that, we also have, and we know, because we live in the city of Vegas, so we know at least anecdotally, if not based in the research, that our nation has changed. The U.S. Phenotypically looks very different. It also sounds very different. We have a large number, we have a lot of diversity in the U.S. And when we look at Las Vegas and even our institution, the diversity, we're the second most diverse campus in the U.S., right? Which we hear a lot. Well, with that, I think comes some thoughts around, well, in addition to, actually I'm going to back up. In addition to this, I think what I like to think of is we've flipped this narrative. I believe we have flipped the narrative as it pertains to traditional and non-traditional students, okay? So what I want you to do in your groups, I'm just going to give you a couple minutes. Let's have this group break out or unpack. When you hear the term traditional, what does it mean in terms of characteristics? When you hear the term, oh, that's a traditional college student, what does that mean for you? So I just want you to list those out in your group, and then you all to unpack when you hear the term non-traditional student, what might that mean?
You mean behavior?
Characteristics,
Okay.
which can portend or have consequence for behavior. Okay, go.
Okay, so I think 9% non-white.
Okay.
Older, we think.
So age.
Older,
Well,
non-white,
traditionally, somebody's
Age,
parents probably
color, race. Also, a lot of times they don't have parents, somebody like you has not.
Yeah.
First generational.
Correct. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Traditional, I think it's false.
Well, yeah, since you said there's a 300% increase in access of parents who didn't have access to their
Right.
children too.
Right, so
good.
there's like new access to school, they have traditional parents.
Right.
Commuters been working full time because, you know, I was an undergraduate a long time ago. And so then also I guess had little jobs or whatever. She didn't go full time.
Yeah, right.
Still full time.
One more minute.
Yeah, did that. Those are the things
I'm
I'm seeing in my teaching right now.
So my definition of traditional college students, I think, are often
I think they're
diverts to the
the
suburban white fresh out of high
bring
school
up religion,
student.
It's like
Probably
they're
paying
kind of
for it
also.
all. A little bit.
Like they're looking to like college.
Yeah, you just can't, that's harder to do.
Really,
That
that's just like
every class I have has somebody, English is not their first language.
Are you from Nevada?
I'm not
15
from-
seconds.
So there's that.
3, 2, and 1. All right, so you've had a chance to buzz within your small groups, so now we'll come back to a large group, okay? I'm going to begin the conversation just in the interest of time. And what we'll do is we'll do traditional and then to non-traditional, okay? So one of the most common characteristics, and this is through NCES, and then Horn has done a lot, so that's why there's a ... here in terms of this notion of non-traditional students. And so one of the characteristics of a traditional student is enrollment right out of high school, right? So then a non-traditional characteristic would be delayed, right? So they have delayed enrollment post-high school, okay? Another characteristic, and I'm gonna let you speak in a minute, is we used to use the term dropout often, drop in, drop out, and now it's more common to use the notion of stop out, right? As it pertains to these folks, because what happens, well, we'll see, actually, we'll fill this in a little bit more. So my traditional group, what's a couple other indicators or characteristics of traditional that describes a traditional student?
Family support system,
Yeah.
particularly economically, frequently.
Right, yes, this is big, so that they are typically dependent on parents, and that is in the literature, dependent on parents. Okay, what else?
We had mentioned they actually go to a campus compared to maybe like alternative route, like online.
That's interesting, that is not, that's interesting, I've not seen that, I'm gonna put that down. I'm not gonna put that, because I think that could describe, what's going through my head is this narrative of, well, it actually describes a variety of folks, so
Yeah.
that's a good thought, though.
Yeah.
What else?
That thought kind of came off of that too, that we were talking. Traditionally, even if you go to a school in your area, you're required to spend your first year in a dorm. So
Right.
it used to be that at least your freshman year, you had to live on campus.
Mhm.
On-campus housing at some level, right?
Mhm.
Okay, what else? Wait, actually, let's stop, let's do some non-traditional. What are some non-traditional characteristics?
There's so many. Older person, like I'm non-traditional, older person with family obligations.
Right,
Full-time.
Dorothy,
Oh, sorry.
one second, no, hold that thought, because then on this side, 18 to 25, right,
Mhm.
is considered a traditional student, so older than 25 years
So that's me too.
is a non-traditional. What else were you gonna say, Dorothy?
A lot of students are working full-time and going to school full-time.
Yep, full-time work.
And or have children.
Right, exactly.
English
They-
learners?
Ooh, y'all are out of control. Right,
There's
you know,
more.
right.
So many more.
Right, so they have dependents, right, and they work full-time, thus the juxtaposition with they are dependents
Yeah.
themselves, right? Very different. And so if we do the work side over here, then these folks may work, but only part-time.
Mhm.
And often on campus.
Yes.
And not for like an actual income to survive.
Right,
It's part of it.
right. Okay, what else? So financially independent would be also an indicator. Falls under there. What else?
Well, under the lines of access, you could, I would say non-white would be non-traditional.
Mhm. Or not English speaking.
International.
International.
We said English
Language
learners.
learners.
Like English isn't their first language.
Okay, I'm gonna put ELL, so English language learners.
Oh,
Yeah.
both.
Okay. Folks of color,
Oh, first generation.
here we go,
First
That's good, yeah.
college people.
first gen.
That's it, more of the access.
All right. So, indeed, right, so we see, so when we look at these, somebody said this earlier, when we look at these, like take a step back metaphorically or just to get cool on your forehead because it's hot up there, what does this, who is this? Who does this look like?
They're all us.
UNLV is
Yes,
all of those
UNLV.
things.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's true.
And who is UNLV? Are you familiar with the institutional type? We're going to get to difficult situations in a minute here. But UNLV, right? We're
So
a
our top
large,
tier?
well, we're a research high institution, right? Moving to very high, thus the top tier. We are a public research designated doctoral granting institution, right? And for us, we are also a minority majority, right? So we have upwards of, I think it's, the last I looked was like 52% approximately, undergraduate ethnic minority, and at the graduate level, I believe it's about 47%, the last data I saw at the graduate level, ethnic minority. We also are 20% approximately first gen, right? And all together, we have this nifty designation at the federal level called a minority serving institution. We're an emerging Hispanic serving institution, emerging because we have about 25% Hispanic Latino population that that receive Pell Grants,
Uh-huh.
right? So Pell Grant is an indicator of what economically? Disadvantage or need, right? So that's a federal designation here. So this has to be in place for some time. And then we are also an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Island institution, right? Yeah, that's a mouthful. And this is 25% maintained, and this is 10% as a federal designation, which opens up funding. But the most important thing here is when we talk about who we have the opportunity to work with, diversity is diversity is diversity, right? And so if we have, and we know that we have lots of folks that are coming to school that are different than has been in our classrooms, and how does our student body reflect the faculty or staff of our institution? If we just use UNLV, does our student population at either the undergrad or the graduate level ethnically, culturally, linguistically reflect our faculty? High, medium, or low?
Medium to low.
But yeah, camera girl's got it going on. Low. It's very low, right? We're doing well in comparison to some other institutions, but overall, not super great. Not super great. And first generation. So we also have a lot of folks that don't have a reservoir of experiences in their immediate life in which they have navigated or know how to navigate being in higher education. And so when these folks come to our classrooms, there's some things that they simply just don't have the skill set, right? And so in the true sense of the definition, they are ignorant of what it means to be a college student. And most folks we know get the idea of how to be a college student via pop culture, which is not, right, I like your face, Josh, which is not a really good,
Yeah, that's what
right, exactly, it's not a good way to get information. So I like to think, how many sporty spices do I have in this class? How many of you are sport fans? All right, so when I say the term, when we talk about working with difficult situations, the first thing that we want to think about, difficult. You're probably wondering, why didn't she use PowerPoint?
I like this better.
I do too.
It's more interactive.
I do too. I bore myself.
We can all read, that's why we're here.
Right. So one of the first things in dealing with difficult situations is, I like to say, the best, and this is a sporty spice term, the best offense is a good
Defense.
right. So by that then it's defense equals preventative,
Prevention.
right? Because we don't want to have these. If you can last in higher ed for even 2 years, let's say 3 semesters, and not have a difficult situation, pat yourself on the back, right? It's inevitable that it's going to happen, right? It's inevitable because we've got lots of folks coming to our campuses, which is super exciting, but we have to think of doing things differently than what we have before, okay? So what you're going to do in your buzz groups is I want you to unpack just a few ideas of what does this mean? What might this look like? And one thing I'll just tell you straight up, so I kind of help frame the conversations a little bit, is having a syllabus ready
Structure.
on day 1, right? So this is the first, and then we'll get into the scenarios, but unpack a little bit. What might it mean based on either your experiences, Courtney, that you've had as a student across the years, so either here or at another institution, or Dorothy, things that you've read or you've watched other folks do that helped frame the class to mitigate rather, difficult situations from occurring, okay? Go, I'll give you just a minute and a half.
It's about
I just recently heard something really wonderful.
Predict the
I'm gonna try to take this.
Right, and that turns out to be a classroom, in my classroom. So she's right about the syllabus, and I put a ton of time and effort into structuring it specifically to avoid very things that end up happening. And it turns out there's things that just there's stupid behavior. And so having a syllabus really details what you expect, like basically what the consequences are.
especially if you end up teaching the same course and you just like keep learning and keep adding, that way you can
For the
control it
schedule
better.
of
No,
work,
I teach,
yeah. The syllabus
the
is
first day
something
I
you give
always
it to
just
them.
say, like, the
That's
expectation
the
is
contract.
Right.
And then
Respect
the
for
schedule
all,
like can
like,
change. So,
30 more seconds?
Like, that's the
I think-
expectation, like, if you don't follow
I think it's impossible to have a plan for every single scenario that would happen. So for me,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just having the being very clear about what my goals are
Is what's respectful,
and
is culturally.
sticking to those, because a lot of students will do lots of stuff and I'll get
Well, I
distracted.
teach public,
So I have
so it's
to be.
pretty like clearly.
Yeah, they're already
Clear.
easily.
They do what they do. But that can be difficult when
Yeah.
things go wrong.
I'll sometimes actually just emphasize
Right,
that
yeah.
it's used
10 seconds?
I could never do this.
and usually acknowledging both
Could never
if
do
you
it
do feel
lower than this,
uncomfortable to the
but,
point
I
of make the
think
contract.
that
If you feel uncomfortable,
understanding
leave the
where
room.
people are coming
Five,
from,
Rather have to do that
different
explain
backgrounds is really important, and that's.
4, because I've been using that for too long, but it worked. All right, so what are some ideas? Because I heard a lot of good things come up in your group. So this first point in terms of working with difficult situations is to have a good defense, right? Preventative. So what are some ideas? Go, anybody, any group.
I mean, the syllabus absolutely, but I can give you details if you want, but also just trying to make it very clear what I want to convey for the whole class and per class, so that I can stick with that. So for me, because I get people behave in my class sometimes in ways that distract me. I'm having a really big problem right now with that. So I wrote a very detailed syllabus specifically to avoid certain behaviors that I see.
Such as, give me an example.
Tardies, like being late, coming late, not just doing what they're supposed to do because I didn't explain it clearly enough, so I put all this work into it, and then it turns out they don't read the syllabus anyway, which led to a giant problem this year that I hope I get a chance to talk about. So yeah, expectations for behavior, point value. I find that my students like points. I think points are incredibly annoying. And I come from a tradition of, you're told to write a paper, you write the paper, you get an A, B, C, D, whatever. I'm older, and I went to undergrad a long time ago, so.
Okay. So indeed, so you've hit on a couple things. So the first day of class is probably your biggest, best foot forward. It really is. It's like setting up a blind date and not showing up, or showing up late and looking scraggly, right? Unless that's the context that you're trying to pull off, right? So your first day of class, you want to make sure that your syllabus is ready to go. And I call it stalking the superior syllabus, right, which is in the literature. So you want to make sure that that is ready and that you actually spend time on that the very first day of class. One of the biggest mistakes you can make in terms of setting the climate and the context is to hand out the syllabi, or the syllabus, excuse me, and then let folks go early. Spend some time on it, right? That is your contract with your students. That's the best way to begin to set who you are and your expectations. Along those same lines, so setting things and noting within that syllabus, things that tardy, that you expect folks to be there on time, reading requirements, right? You can talk about the format of class. You can even also have some snippet in there or discussion around your pedagogical style, right? Because that's going to front load who you are to those students, so they again know what to expect. If we're thinking back on or relative to our previous discussion, first-gen folks that aren't used to higher ed or haven't had that experience, you want to give them as much front as possible, okay? What else would be some other things to have a defense versus or preventative? What else? What else did you talk about?
One of the things that I mentioned that I do on days when I know I'm going to be having a potentially hot topic is I start at the beginning of class by, first of all, laying some ground rules. A lot of times those emphasize or reiterate something from the class expectations, but then also going into making an agreement with them of mutual respect that if they get to a point where they feel so uncomfortable that they can tell they're going to blow, that I respect them enough to be adult enough to leave the room and just come back and let me know I was just not comfortable. And on the flip side, my anticipation in earning that is that they in turn challenge themselves to try to understand the other side and really engage in conversation. I mean, in our class, sometimes we get into things like homelessness and sexuality, but with diversity and religion, that doesn't always leave students comfortable.
Right. No, and so depending upon the nature of the courses you teach, this is a must, right? So if you are teaching diversity courses or social context or socially related or topics in a class, to set the mutual agreement of the course is huge for the class.
What is third rail?
Oh, third rail, so I joke about this because I teach third rail classes, classes in which that are full of third rails. So the third rail, like you don't want to touch the third rail because it'll electrocute you. So the topics that we avoid, right? So politics, religion, sexuality, identities,
The good
right?
stuff.
The good stuff, right? The good stuff I like you talking. Okay, what else? What else might we do to prevent setting expectations? What about having students have a say in the expectations? What do y'all think of that?
Definitely.
Why definitely?
It helps the class come together as a group. So if you are a teacher and you tell whoever you're teaching what everything is, then they don't even feel like they're part of the learning environment and they're always being told what to do. Where if you were to come together and maybe, hey, what works best? When do you want the final test to be? I mean, obviously you're gonna have a date, but you just ask the students what they're looking for in the class, and maybe you have like a week that is open to what they're trying to learn when they took intro to social or something like that.
Mm-hmm. You know, we always, and actually before I continue, I want to introduce Jennifer Gutman. I know Jen from our college. We're doing buzz groups, and we're getting ready actually to do scenarios. So when we get to scenarios, if you would join Dorothy and Josh.
Sure.
So indeed, I completely agree. I think even with first year folks, I almost said freshmen, even with first years. So if the more you can invite folks to have a input into the class, the more engaged they are going to be. They're going to pay attention. You also have the opportunity to develop some skills that students otherwise don't get a chance to develop, right? We bemoan the student culture, right, as unengaged, which is funny. I always tell this story. Like, you walk into a first year class. Like last night, I went to a showing in a social class for a documentary video. And I walk in and I could hear it before I even opened the door. I mean, they were engaged. They were talking, right? And so we know that folks, they are excited to be there. And then when class starts, you can't get them to say their first name, right? So it's trying to create the situation in the context that they feel that they are invited and their voices do matter. And so if you can make use of example buzz groups, you can have folks in small groups that first day of class, right? Within your small group, I want you to talk about one or two things that happen in a discussion that shut you down or that pushes your buttons. In your small groups, go. And then what you can do is you have these groups that are talking about what they feel, right? And then you can report out as a large group, and then from that report out, you not automatically, but you can arrive at consensus in terms of a group or a class created set of expectations and behavior, right? What you want to see happen, okay? That's one idea. And I think here is also the point I want to make, and then we're going to do some scenarios, is you don't have to go it alone, right? And I think a lot of times we think as professors, don't do it alone. We feel like we have to, we do just have to do that, right? We're the ones getting paid, blah, blah, blah. But if we really try and think or flip that switch, that narrative, that we are creating, that I'm not teaching a class, I'm facilitating learning, thus I'm trying to engender or nurture a sense of a community, a learning community in class that really changes how you see yourself and how you position yourself to the folks in the class, because they really are your colleagues, right? I'm not saying they all vote not to have a test. I'm not saying go cray-cray, right? I'm just saying the more you can invite folks into the conversation, your students into the conversation, it'll be a more robust conversation and environment in the classroom, okay?
It is actually really amazing how when you turn around and treat them like junior academics or adults, how quickly they rise to the challenge of following a lot of those rules.
It's very true. It's very true. I mean, yeah, that's very true.
So high classroom expectations.
Do I have that on here?
Yeah, you have classroom expectations, but I think what you're saying is just like high.
Yes.
It depends, yeah. It depends on what you want to achieve, right?
The other thing, and I think our institution does a really nice job, is make sure that you are aware of the policies, right? As it pertains to the university. Thank you. So that's the list that comes out now twice a year in terms of the policies for misconduct. No Phil Burns' office is outstanding. When I taught undergraduate courses, I would actually have him come in, someone from his office come in that first or second week and talk with the students, give them an overview, because they have rights, right? They need to know their rights, but they also need to know what the expectations are in terms of conduct, in terms of plagiarism, and that's a 30 minutes that will be well spent. So make use of your university policies, okay? So the best offense is a good defense, or the best defense is a good offense rather, but for sure there's always things that are going to get by you. Stuff happens. We have the opportunity to work with people, right? So things happen. So what I have created here is 4 of my favorites. These are true life situations that happened to me across the years. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each group 2 scenarios. Actually, we'll just do 1 and 1 and then 1 and 1. So we'll go through 2 rounds. I'm going to give you a scenario, and then I want you to talk through how you would handle this. Because there's not necessarily, I mean, we can build a foundation for sure, but there's not necessarily always a right way, if then this, because these are folks, these are people. But there are better ways than others to handle it. And the only way to get good at it is to talk through and process, okay? So here's
The student is having a bad time. Not because I'm a bad teacher, because this is something judgmental. With impunity. So I write them back and I keep myself, well, that's my experience. I keep myself professional over the email. So I say, dear so-and-so, thank you for your feedback. What I hear you saying is you're upset with this particular situation. What can I do to help you with this situation? I say a lot of things like that to try and address what the problem is and what I could possibly do. I always direct them to reread the syllabus if it's something they just simply weren't reading. I always say, you haven't been to class in a week, or I bring out things that are relevant. And then at the end,
one more minute.
Sometimes it is that
really
simple.
disrespectful. I say, all
Citing
this
the
said, you don't
university
have the right to
organization
email
policy,
me
that kind of
in
thing.
a rude tone, so you can come and see me in person.
Oh, I didn't mean that.
So far,
If
it's
they
worked.
get offended.
That's what I
They
think.
could go.
What do you want then? Like, what do you want?
Yeah,
How
that
can we
makes
make
sense.
it more?
Yeah.
And I would definitely encourage this person to come to office hours and say, I would say, I really would like to make an appointment with you. You should come on and we can talk about what you're
15
expecting,
seconds.
what is not happening.
I have a student coming tomorrow.
4,
It's not.
3,
Yeah. Another thing too, I mean,
2,
I've had the experience where some students feel
and
like they're not challenged.
1.
Exactly, like
And
here, this is
1.
an article, this is great.
She's exempt.
That's good. All right, so I'm just going to read these. And then we'll unpack, beginning with first the voices of the scenario. All right, so this is scenario 1. A student sends an email in which he lets you know that you are not doing a good job in class. He states the class is boring, doesn't motivate him to learn. Your class is a huge waste of time. That's a little ad-lib because this did happen to me. And he just feels it's his duty to let you know that you're not doing a good job. Love, student. What do you do? Right? How do you handle this? How do you handle this? And you had scenario 1?
We had 4.
You had scenario 1. How did you handle this? Go ahead.
Well, you already had this, right? So you try to remain polite when you send a response, right? You want to remain professional and say, thank you so much for your feedback and yada yada, but perhaps what is it that you're looking for from the class? The student just kind of, it's like a repeal but not replace type of mentality, which I think we're all familiar with. But let us know what it is that you want from the class, or like how can I help you? And perhaps instruct them or recommend that this is a conversation that you could probably have in person rather than be a keyboard warrior.
Yes.
It's easy to say these
Yes.
things when you're not in front
Thank
of
you.
someone.
Do not be a keyboard warrior. Don't do it, folks. I promise you, I existed in the profession prior to email. And so this was one of the first, if not the first, hangry email I ever got, right? And your first sense is to do what? Is to
Fire right back.
I know, right? It's just like international sign of hangry emailing, right? You're like, wow. Do it. Do it, get it out, get the energy out,
And then delete
do
it.
it, and then delete.
Yeah.
Do not be a keyboard warrior. It's not gonna go anywhere fast well. How many of you would respond by email and so saying what you did? So I appreciate your feedback, right? Because what you wanna do is you wanna acknowledge, so you wanna see folks. Because behavior for me is motivated by the need to be seen and to be heard, right? We're all trying to strike our balance. Whatever the situation, we're all trying to find a balance. And the angry email that you just got from that student may or may not be related directly to your class. He just might be having not a good time in his home life and he needs to share with you, right? That can happen. But what you want to do, because you don't want 250 of these emails coming in all the time because you'll build that culture, is you want to see them. So responding like you did, Dorothy, thank you for your email. I appreciate your input. And then what would you say? What would be the best next sentence?
Come see me at my office hours
Yeah,
from
let's
9 to
check.
3 tomorrow. I'm open at 1.
Invite them to.
Oh, actually, I'm busy, so.
Right.
That
That happens. No, you invite them to meet, because what you don't want to do, you don't need to get into a debate about the quality of your teaching, but asking them so salient questions as it pertains to the syllabus, as it pertains to what their expectations are. And it might just be that you're going to have to agree to disagree, right? But again, at least you're developing that relationship. Now, this particular student, that's exactly what I did. And to this day, those of you that are Facebook friends with me at Doris L. Watson, I am still friends, because I use it only for professional stuff. He is still a friend of mine. He's actually Dr. David Gaddy. Yes, and he's still a friend of mine. We talk often. And so, not that you need to be Facebook friends with folks, but this is a relationship. You have a relationship with each of those students at varying levels. And what you're trying to do is engender a community of learners, right? And not all of your classes, everybody's going to think you're knocking it out of the park. And you don't need to, but having the conversation is really, really key, right? And to diffuse, okay? Anything else that you would do differently? Or that you would add in addition?
I would just say in the sense of openness, you could perhaps not instantly think that, oh, this person's wrong, I'm so great at teaching. Be open, maybe they have something nice to say, or something helpful, I guess is what I should say.
Yeah.
I've also heard of teachers giving certain students like more work if they're looking for more work or more challenging work.
Yeah.
Here's an article, give me a summary, like, kind of tailor their specific need, cater to their specific needs, if that's the type of student that's how they, excel in a certain class, that they want more work or something like that.
Yeah.
Teacher, I'm bored. Oh, okay.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. And so you're differentiating the learning environment, right? And you're meeting their needs. And I completely agree with your comment too, Josh, to not personalize it, which is hard to do sometimes, right? Because teaching is one of the most personal professions that we can engage in. And so it's like, oh, man, they don't like my belt, or, oh, I just failed today. Yeah, but to not personalize that is super, super important, super important. Okay, let's do scenario 4. This is one of my favorites. One of your students consistently waits after class to walk you to your office. The student seems very interested and excited about the content of your class. The student comes to your office hours regularly to ask questions or just to shoot the breeze. After the midterm, the student asks you to coffee. The student is a few years older than you, single, and attractive. It's Denzel Washington, y'all. How do you proceed? How do you proceed? Courtney, what would you do?
I just would make it like pretty clear, like that's crossing a line that we are not going to cross.
I would be sure to thank them and explain that, maybe sometimes depending on the field, and this is the hard part, is it depends on the field, the student, how they're approaching it.
Right.
If there is a sense of they're looking for anything more, sometimes you can default to, oh, well, I'm sorry, but our university has a non-fraternization policy with students. And we can, like you had mentioned when we were talking, that we can keep it to office hours. If it is something where you think they're genuinely just interested in expanding upon the content of the class, then just accept, I appreciate the offer, but I'm really, really busy and I need to keep it, into office hours or something along those lines. I mean, there's always ways to politely bow out
Mhm.
if you're worried about a student who may have stalker feelings that you don't want to trigger. But generally speaking, most universities have a non-fraternization policy or something that you can use, to hide behind if you need to.
Right.
Always say thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always appreciate it.
Because, because it can be content driven, or as Josh said, we also need to be careful not to personalize it overly either, because it could just be the fact that this student is interested in your research and your content. But you're always wanting to keep it as professional and as upfront professional as possible. Because this does happen. And this is probably the scenario that does generate the most discussion, because depending upon your discipline, there are different ways that folks, the level of community within a discipline varies quite a bit. Like, you're a lab discipline, right?
And the social world.
Yes.
That's our lab.
Yes, and so social world and lab. So you're in the lab working with folks a lot. Education, not so much, so it'll look differently, right? So for us to be super upfront and professional, but this goes back then to being aware of your university policies. What else would you do? Anybody do anything differently?
In the past where the professor invites the whole lab over to their house and kind of opens that up. But I think the main difference here is that it's the professor that's creating the culture and the boundaries,
Right.
as opposed to the student who's creating the, initiating. And so I think it's important for the professor to kind of, if that's okay with them, say, look, if you want to meet for coffee, talk about your research, how it could fit with mine, that's fine, but make sure that it is professional and it is legit and it's not for anything else but that, so.
Right, so establishing, again, your baseline, and because you've articulated that very well. So if it's group, then it's always group. So I had a lab when I was in health sciences back at University of Utah, and we did things consistently. Trying to do it here, so I've done things as grad coordinator where I call it office and then parenthetically happy hours. And I'll just say office happy hours. Dr. Watson will be at tacos and beer to all the graduate students in the department. Come, I'll buy all the food, I don't care what you drink, but you're responsible, and we can talk, and that I've done this. I'll send even an article from the Chronicle that will allow us then to have a professional conversation on current issues in the area. So just to build that sense of community in different ways, right? If it's one-on-one, then I would do one of two things. You can codify that by also putting it in your syllabus, right? So I do a thing called, it just went out of my head, what's it called? Coffee Talk, yeah. It's called Coffee Talk, and you can get a hold of me, it's in the syllabus, and we will go to someplace on campus and we'll talk about anything you need professionally. I'll look at cover letters, I'll look at whatever you need. So it's codified that way individually. If it's beyond that, then to keep it in your office.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is you could just say, I accept coffee in my office.
Yeah.
Regularly.
If it's delivered, it's fine.
Yeah.
Technically service.
Right. Anything else with those two scenarios?
Kind of going off that I accept coffee, I've even in some instances been careful when students ask if I'm allowed to accept gifts, because I want to be cautious of not appearing as though I might be selling A's. And it's just something that I'm so aware of with our current environment, because we do have so many things, not just at this university, but colleges in general, that are going through student conduct and stuff these days. And I always tell them, after your grades are posted, final grades, you can come talk to me and bring me anything you want.
Right. In fact, so let's do this. Let me read this next one. Can we do another one?
Sure.
Okay. Are these helpful to talk through, or
Yeah.
do you want to just leave now?
No, I like them.
Okay. If you want to leave, you can. Scenario 3, and this is a segue directly from what you just said, Shelley. You hand back the midterm test to your class. As you do so, you notice a couple of students rapidly discussing their scores. After class, one of the students comes to your office to discuss the test. She is obviously not pleased with her score. She begins the conversation telling you how important the class is to her and that she needs this class to get into physical therapy school. She cannot fail this class. How do you proceed? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes in your groups, so you can reread, because sometimes hearing and reading.
too, and I don't want to dominate it, so I want to hear what you think.
I just thought it was funny that she said these are all he's and you said it's always these young males and confused.
I know, it's like, probably should have even said that, but.
Well, and also there's a.
No, actually,
this
this, you,
offer
this
for
was
like
with the,
extra credit
When
points that
everything,
everyone has to
yeah,
get.
so I don't know that you can change that particular.
So-
Is it kind of like an SOL, right?
no, what I do, I mean, maybe, but what I do is I talk about what's happening, what it is, I say, let's meet and look over the exam and see what it was you didn't understand and how could you have understood, you know, I gave this lecture in class and you weren't there,
And those
you know,
details were very
I mean, not in a
great.
way that I just really care
Letting
about
them know
that,
how much
but I,
they-
you know, I want them to be receiving that.
Yeah.
So I basically make sure that the person's
Come
really
talk to
clear
your
about
office
what it
office
is
and
that
talk about what
he or she should be doing.
we can identify.
Because it's not up to me to
It's time management.
like
issue.
give them a grade because they did.
Success coach, so you have more.
I mean, you're not gonna take pity on somebody who didn't show up to the class where you taught the
Right,
information
and
that
sometimes
they
they're
missed
there
on
in
the
every class,
test.
but they
They
just
always
did,
did the way
you know,
they
they're not
wrote
good
their
students,
essay.
so then I also always recommend writing
Helping
center,
identify
get tutoring,
what
and, you know,
caused
I
the
point them to all these
Yeah.
different resources.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell
A
them,
lot
you
of
can come
times
and
what they're
see
looking
me
for
anytime.
is.
One more minute?
You can
Yeah.
reference the
Support, but
policies
you don't
on
know how to ask
withdrawal
them.
or
So they-
I don't know,
Yeah,
replacement.
I try to do whatever I can to
Miss
let them
Levin.
feel like they can
Yeah.
succeed in the
Like, I
class.
can't change grade.
But I don't lie to them, so I'll say something like, if you want to pass this class, these are the things you need to do and have this time.
And one.
Yeah.
All right, so how would you handle this? What would you do?
Well, I know what I wouldn't do.
Okay,
I would not change their grade because then they're gonna think that the next time that they come to me after a bad score, I'm gonna change the grade again. So I know what I wouldn't do that. But as Josh said and you said, it's important to keep an open mind always if somebody has a concern. So I think you should definitely look through the test just in case you did make an error. And she made a good point. Maybe there was a question that was vague or unclear. In that case, you can send an email to the whole class. Hey, this one got ejected from the test, and everybody 2 more points or something like that. So that's just.
how many of you would speak with the individual right then?
I was thinking that too, making a yeah.
So let's unpack, so that's why it's good to unpack.
Yeah.
Usually they come to you at that, like, right then, they don't wait and come to your office later.
Yeah.
They
Right.
come up to you right then and say, what is this, you know? And
Exactly,
that's
and
where I
how,
have
what
to
are
try
they,
to
what are they,
diffuse
what's
it.
happening? Exactly, what's
Yeah.
happening right then. I just got my test back and I did not do as well as I thought I was going to. What's my emotional state? Ah!
Yeah. Panic.
I know.
Right? Yeah, I want and I'm a student, right? And so I'm the student and I need this class. They're upset, right? So I keep saying right today. I think the better way of handling that is not to engage directly in the conversation at that moment. It's to, like we said before, acknowledge and make sure that you know, that they know that you see them. Courtney, I appreciate that you're upset right now, and I know that this class is important to you. I know this class is important to everybody. I totally got this. So let's take a minute, or let's take a day, and what I'd like you to do is take the test back home, and it's going to give you some time to go through and look at what you did and what you didn't do based on your understanding of the material. And then let's schedule a time, pull out your phone, I've got my phone now, and let's make a time to come together in the next day or so, and we'll talk about it. Okay? Because then, again, it's about acknowledging and seeing folks. Acknowledging and seeing, not being dismissive. Because you don't want to arrive too soon at, I'm not changing the grade.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Right?
That's after I said that, I was like, well, actually, I'm gonna open that, yeah. So.
Yeah, it's hard, because you don't want to do that, because then what happens is that's going to be after every test you had, Dorothy's like,
Yeah.
yep, after every test you had back, or every assignment, you're going to have this battle. And so one of the things I used to do as a function of this was, I would say, I just started front loading in my class that post-exam, so any exam or any assignment would come back to you at the very end of class, and that I would not entertain discussion on the merits of the grading of that assignment or exam or quiz until the following day. So you have or the following class session. So you have the opportunity to go home and go through, see what was done, what was asked, and what you were marked off for, what was wrong, and then we'll come back, and then the very beginning of the next class, I would make sure and allow for 10 to 15 minutes of a fruitful discussion, right? And the way I put it in my syllabus back then was, I don't want to wrestle about grades. I don't want to arm wrestle about this. I'm not interested in that. But let's have the conversation. Because exactly what you said could happen is that, and you should do this anyway when you do tests, if you do Scantrons, but make sure you understand the most missed question and why that might have been so, because there's always invalid questions, right? So that's definitely one way to do it. I think doing, the more we can, and I know Dr. Winklemas, how many of you have had an opportunity? Yeah, the more you can probably interact around this notion of transparency of teaching. There's some really good articles online that you can download from. I think she's got a website here. The more you can invite what it is you're doing and why you're doing it with your students, and then as you're setting the stage, using your syllabus and then the kinds of things you include and the kinds of conversations you have, the better able you will be to mitigate or lessen the likelihood that difficult situations will occur.
I think also pointing out, like, this is only a midterm, so like you still have the rest of the semester to get enough points together to try to pass for your physical therapy class, and making sure they know, like, you're not the one stopping them from passing this class to go on to physical therapy school. Like, it's in you, so you need to, how can I help you put together a schedule where you study a little bit more or know the content a little bit more so that you can do better on the finals.
Something that goes with that is knowing the resources that are available on campus, because until I found myself in the ASC, I didn't know half the stuff that we have available to students.
Yep.
And so it can be the 10 to 15 minute conversation, your office hours, figuring out where they're struggling, because a lot of times when they're mad at you, it's because they're just generally panicked and stressed.
Right.
They actually think, like you said, they have subcategories to put it. But knowing, okay, let's try to identify, is it your time management? Have you seen an academic success coach?
Yep.
And your study skills? Is it that you're not understanding material about supplemental instruction or tutoring? And then they feel like you're actually trying to help them and support them as opposed to tough cookies.
Right.
Which they get a lot of right now.
Exactly, because in these situations, you're not trying to be right. You're trying to unpack and be helpful. Right? I know that was a loaded sentence right then. But I think, so there's one other thing I thought of, so the transparency. Oh, something that I also used to do, because I taught large lecture classes when I was at University of Utah and here, and so we had quizzes and we had exams and assignments. So what I started doing, because this would happen, because I was in exercise sports science, so a lot of our students were pre-med, physical therapy, so we were a door to other professional degrees. So students were really rattled about their grades, and so it's like, okay, I'm getting this. So I started doing after each exam, so once before the midterm, so quarter, midterm, and then 3/4, and then towards the end, giving them what their grades were, so that there would be the same cluster of assignments, and then I would just tell them what their total points is here, and this is based on the course breakdown of grades, this is where you're at. So that helped also folks to understand where they were and what they needed, blah, blah, blah. So again, just the more information you can give them, it's a little more work for you, but in the long run, it really does save you in the end, for sure, in terms of climate. And then you also have the opportunity to assist folks, because the other piece to this, again, and it goes back to knowing and being aware of what's on campus, 10 out of 10 times when I've had a student that has done poorly consistently or always on an exam or a quiz, I will pull them in, I'll ask to meet with them. If we're getting to that third and it's just like miserable, but they're coming to class and they're participating, 10 out of 10 times in my experience, there is a learning disability for them, an undiagnosed learning disability, 10 out of 10 times. And so bringing in that student and speaking with him or her, how do they study, how much time are they allotting, can help illuminate. And then for you to connect them to resources so that they can, because sometimes it's as simple, and it's amazing, it's as simple as having them take the exam or the quiz outside of the classroom in a different setting. I've had folks need, instead of the 12-point font, 24 or 30-point font on their exams. I mean, just those differences made a ginormous benefit to them, so they're different. So being aware of that stuff is super helpful. We're right at 2, but I do want to say, so these scenarios are based in just my quirky fun experiences and unpacking them. but having the opportunity to navigate, so you always have your foundation of the things that you definitely want to make sure that you're doing to set the stage for your students in the best possible way, and that things will arrive for sure, for sure. The University of Minnesota has a teaching and learn to tutorial, so if you Google that, and it's called Scenes from a Classroom, Managing Conflict, and there's 12 video vignettes that they've had grad students and professors role play, and so you'll see these vignettes, and then they'll have 2 different debriefs based on how you would have handled that. So that's a great, again, continued professional development for you and your classmates. So like you all hang out together, clearly. Hey, let's go get coffee and do a couple vignettes, right? You have something to do. But no, this is a super, super resource. University of Minnesota in general has some really cool stuff online for graduate and new faculty. Okay. Any final questions or thoughts?
It just seems like once you get through the prevention, when you're dealing with negative situations like this,
Excuse me, it's best to understand how to give positive feedback, like you kept mentioning acknowledgement and appreciation of their concerns and making sure that they understand that you're hearing them, and then how to channel that into how best to solve whatever it is.
Solutions.
Yeah, solutions.
Yeah. You know, and you made me think of something too, because some days and none of us in this room are baby Jesus or Buddha, Fleetwood Mac, whatever your religious underpinnings are, right? None of us are deities. So we have bad days too. And so for you to be mindful of that and be able to say like that you need to step back sometimes, or that you've been triggered, because you don't want to be in that space in that time. So for you just to remember, you're trying to solve solutions. So difficult situations are going to arrive, but what is the solution? What is the solution, and how can we have a line of communication? Absolutely, I like that. Anything else, good folks?
it's good.
Thank you. Well, hopefully you've gotten at least a minute and a half of something to put in your pedagogical backpacks as you move on. And I am super available anytime. Watson@unlv.edu. Send me an email anytime if you have questions or you want some materials on teaching. I do teach a class, EDH 780, Seminar in College Teaching. So I know Shelley. I've known Jen forever, but Jennifer's in the class this semester. So, seriously, if you have any questions or you want to troubleshoot something, don't hesitate. Shoot me an email, and I will go to coffee time. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.